Hey everyone, it's David Chen, and today on the channel we're going to be discussing Black Adam, the newest DC Universe film starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Here to join me for this conversation, she is a film critic who you can see on YouTube at youtube.com/Sydney Volpe. Sydney Volpe, thanks for chatting with me today.
Thanks for having me on, David. I'm honored, very excited to talk about some movies today.
So I need to start by asking you this question. Now that you've seen Black Adam, I've seen Black Adam. Has the balance of power in the DC universe changed, in your opinion?
Something's changed. I don't know if it's the balance of power necessarily. um, and we'll talk about that. I think that I don't know how much you know about my thoughts on this movie. All I saw about your thoughts was that it is definitely a movie. That was your reaction that I
Of all
saw.
the movies, of all the superhero films I've ever seen, Black Adam is one of them. That's
It,
my
it
that's my
it was
thoughts.
one of them. I
It was
noticed
one
that
of them,
too.
right? Yeah. Did
Yeah,
you
that was
notice
really
that?
interesting. I
Yeah,
did.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Very
yeah.
very
Okay.
evident.
All right. Enough joking though. Enough joking. Sydney Volpe, what did you think overall of Black Adam?
I didn't despise Black Adam. I have definitely seen worse movies come out of both Marvel and DC, but I definitely think I didn't like it as much as a lot of other people. And my big disclaimer with that is that I am totally capable of having like dumb fun. I love dumb fun action movies, and that was really what I wanted to get out of this because that was probably the most frequent reaction I was hearing is that it's great action and it's just like a fun time. But I just couldn't get on board with it at the end of the day. And I think it's probably one of my least favorite DC movies. And so it was a huge bummer. There were parts I liked, which we can talk about. But what were your thoughts overall?
So I will say, Black Adam takes place nearly 5,000 years after the character of Teth Adam was bestowed with the almighty powers of the Egyptian gods and imprisoned. But he is freed in modern day and unleashes a unique form of justice on the world. That's from the IMDb description. Uh, I thought this movie was not great, but let's start with some of the things that were pretty good about it. Okay. I've actually liked the action. I thought the action was pretty cool looking for the most part. There's a lot of slow motion in the movie,
Yep.
kind of very heavily inspired by Zack Snyder and 300, from my what I can tell. And the movie will slow down dramatically at specific points and give you these beautiful tableaus of what these basically gods are doing to fight each other, and that's pretty cool. Like I like that because I do think that a lot of modern action filmmaking doesn't slow down and is too fast, and you can't really make out what's going on. And so, in general, I could make out most of what was happening on screen. Uh, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is fine as Black Adam. I think the costume looks pretty cool. I think the character of Black Adam not super interesting in this movie, but he himself like does a fine job of playing that character. So there's that, and it's fun to see Pierce Brosnan in a superhero film. And I'll say I quite enjoyed that as
He was
well.
great.
Yeah. So those are some of my pluses with Black Adam. Anything that you liked about this film? Because I suspect that a lot of this review is going to be us talking about things we didn't like.
Yeah, no, I agree. There were things I liked. I think the action was well shot for the most part, and it was really fun. I love slow mo action. For the most part, I don't think everything Zack Snyder has made is great, but I am a fan of Zack Snyder and the action that he did with Zack Snyder's Justice League, all of that, and 300. And I thought the action was good. And I thought that the special effects, for the most part, were really great. Like, I thought all the heroes looked great in those slow mo sequences. I really liked what they did with the design for Cyclone. I thought the special effects looked great and the action was great. Pierce Brosnan, huge standout. I need a Dr. Fate movie like
Mm-hmm.
now. I thought he was probably the most emotionally resonant part of the film, his dynamic with Hawkman. Um, and he was great because you're just getting a different level of acting from his character as well,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Mm-hmm.
a big problem I had throughout the film. I do think this movie doesn't waste time getting into the action. There is like not a whole lot going on besides like the
Besides
main
the action.
conflict and the action. And it did make good use of that spectacle, and looked surprisingly great. So I totally agree. The action is probably the best part of this movie. And I liked all the characters. I liked the Justice Society. It's unfortunate that it just wasn't their movie, so we didn't get to spend a lot of time with the characters. But I thought their dynamic was great, and I'd be interested to see them in other films. So a lot of good components individually. I think just as a whole, it didn't totally come together for me.
I will say I did not love the Justice Society. I know the Justice Society
Really?
goes back for many, many decades. Like I know it's like from
Hmm.
the comics and it is distinct from the Justice League. Like I understand all those things. Um, but this is like the same issues that DC has always had trying to make its own universe, which is you introduce the Justice Society in this movie as a kind of fully formed entity, but we haven't had any time with these characters prior to now.
Right.
And yet, the movie wants us to feel things, to be emotionally invested in the relationships between the characters of the Justice Society. Um, and it really didn't work for me, unfortunately. I will also say that I know again. I know there's a hallowed history of Justice Society, but I think Justice Society just kind of sounds like a silly name, just in general. Like, I think stuff that works in comics might not work in movies as much, and so having a Justice Society, like even people in the movie seem to agree with me. They're like, "Who is this Justice Society?" Like, it feels like an after school club. Basically, is like the name Justice Society, in my opinion.
Right.
Again, just in movie form. I'm not saying anything about the comics. Like I'm sure the comics have been excellent, and I'm sure it's been incredible writing and art and so on. But in movie form, I don't know that it fully works. And again, it feels like DC is just trying to fast forward to the end of you know uh, of all this character work that Marvel has done via individual movies, and Captain America, the First Avenger, and Captain America, Civil War, and Captain America, the Winter Soldier. It's like, imagine if we got to Avengers Endgame and we had none of those movies. Like, what would our investment be in Captain America at that point?
Right.
Kind of what this movie feels like a little bit. So,
Yeah, I
all right.
agree. And someone had said, just to, to build on that point, someone had said that it would be good if all of the Justice Society had gotten their own standalone film and then they could come together. But DC couldn't even get that done with the Justice League. It would be
Right.
nice, but I
Well,
totally agree.
I mean, Black Adam as a movie, I believe, has been in development for like over a
15 years or
decade.
something.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So it's like they could
Craziness.
barely get this movie. This is one origin story for one character.
Yeah,
But they try to kind of shoehorn in the Justice Society in there. Feels a little bit weird to me, in my
it
opinion.
does.
So,
I agree.
okay. Anything else about the movie that we liked? Because otherwise, I think it is time to start talking about some of the challenges we have with this film. So,
Yeah, I wish I could say more, but
yeah.
I think most of it is negative.
Yeah. Okay. And should we say full spoilers at this point? We're gonna go full spoilers. So,
Sure, why not?
overall, Sydney and I thought that the movie was just fine, not great, probably not god awful. It sounds like is what our opinion is. So it's okay. Sydney, do you think it's god awful?
No, I don't think it was god awful. It's hard to know what to expect going into these superhero movies at this point. It's everything that you've seen before, and so I think it was just a little lackluster, not really bringing anything new to the table.
Let's talk about spoilers for Black Adam starting right now. So, uh, yeah, we already talked about kind of the issues with the Justice Society. It was really weird for me to watch the movie and not feel like this is a bizarro version of the Avengers because you have the black dude with the mechanical wings, you know. And I was like, "Is this just Bizarro Falcon?" From the Avengers. And then you have the other, the guy who is basically like Ant-Man. Like becoming his suit even looks like
Yes,
Ant-Man's suit, right? Atom Smasher, I think is
exactly.
his character's name, right?
Adam Smasher,
Uh,
and then you've got Doctor Fate. Oh my
yes,
gosh, I was
who's like a
getting
Doctor
Doctor
Strange.
Strange deja
Yeah,
vu like every 2 seconds, which I understand that Doctor Fate as a character came before Doctor Strange, so he has him there, but a lot of it definitely felt very reminiscent of Marvel, which is unfortunate.
I didn't think they did a great job of defining Doctor Fate's powers. Like,
Hmm.
it was like, okay, he can like manipulate matter, but also he can tell the future, but also he can create like these shields and stuff like that, and he can like shield people from, is
Yes.
he's okay. All of them are just like ultra powerful. I guess is kind of where I'm landing on this. Um,
Yep.
here's the fundamental journey that Black Adam goes on in the movie. Right, is he wakes up from his sleep. He starts just freaking owning people right off the bat. And you know what? It surprised me, Sydney, because this is one of the first times I can remember seeing straight up cruelty in a superhero film. Like, there is often people who are like, don't care about the henchmen and the collateral damage. Like, that happens a lot. But this is the first time, or one of the first times, where I felt like, from a theoretically the protagonist or the hero who like does go on a journey in this movie, but like where I felt like the main character was cruel. Do you know? Like, because there's many scenes of people like literally begging for their lives, and the guy just like
Hmm.
freaking offs them without even thinking about it. And the idea, I think, is that by the end of the movie, everyone's trying to convince him like, you can be good. You don't need to like freaking torture these people to death. And then he's like, I guess you're right. And that's the kind of journey he goes on. But I don't know. The journey felt pretty half baked to me. Like, I don't think that much happens to get him to the place where I feel like I can really root for this character. But yeah, what did you think of the character of Black Adam? Were you at all bothered by the cruelty, or was it kind of just like, this is pretty standard superhero fare for you?
I definitely wasn't bothered by it. I liked the darker take and I think it was successful. Like it didn't feel like they were shying away from that aspect of his character. And I do think in these more standard kind of cookie cutter films, we haven't seen a lot of that. I think if you're going into like the more, I don't even know how to separate them at this point, like the more serious version of the DC films, like you see Robert Pattinson's The Batman beating up on some people pretty bad and something like that. But I definitely I kind of agree. I don't know if it was fully successful in creating this character and developing his backstory and making us really feel his motivations and having something that was fully fleshed out for why he was being so cruel because it kind of tells you this one thing and then in the last act it says, "Oh, this is actually why he's doing all this and this reveal with his son, etc." And then he's
That was a
like,
cool reveal, and then you see like the Dwayne the Rock Johnson's head on a smaller guy's body. Like, that was
they
kind of,
Captain America him.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But what's interesting is like, even the smaller guy, is still like super jacked in my opinion. Like,
Hmm.
he's not like some skinny stick person. He's like
I know, and he's
still
just
like
got a
a
massive
muscular
head.
dude. Yeah, he just has a massive head. Exactly right. But so the whole time I was wondering like, why does Black Adam care about this kid in this movie, right? Eamon, I think is the character's name. Why
Yeah,
does he care
something like
about
that.
Eamon at all? Because most of the action of the movie is Black Adam, them trying to save Eamon's life, right? Why does Black Adam care about it? And I was like, this is pretty poorly set up. But then they do explain, hey, actually, Black Adam is the guy's father from the first scene. So of course he would care about his kid who he couldn't help save in the first scene. It's like, okay, I mean, I guess it shows that you at least thought of it. I don't know that I'm like super convinced, but at least they had an idea there, which is he couldn't save his kid from the before times. And so now that he has an opportunity to save some other person's kid, he is really invested in it. But I don't think they
A
really
for
built up the
effort.
relationship between those characters. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
I almost think
I
it
don't
would have
really
been.
believe that he would, you know, go after this person's kid, because he doesn't give a shit about anything in the rest of the movie. Anyway, go ahead.
It's true. Well, so I'm like, I get that it's you're kind of like leaving the mystery and having this reveal at the end, but would it have been better if they just bit the bullet and said it all at the beginning? Then we understand him. We understand both his rage and his desire to save this kid and why he is so angry. And we can kind of follow the character through that lens through the whole time because I was a little confused about his motivations and kind of what emotional arc we were actually on. You get this reveal, it's just a little, it's too little too late, at least for me.
Yeah,
Um, so,
I think we've seen. Have you been watching like Rings of Power by any chance?
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
of
I've
course.
talked about that on the Decoding TV podcast a lot about how uh, there's a lot going on right now where creators, filmmakers, showrunners would rather like, haha, surprise, twist. They want that moment where the audience gasps, and in order to get to that moment, they're willing to sacrifice character development. Right? They're
Right.
willing to sacrifice us understanding what the character is doing and investing in that. Maybe they're just assuming you're going to watch Black Adam at least twice, and it's all going to make it the second time. It's like this all makes sense now, right? Um, but yeah, I would
Yeah.
agree with you that like saving it for a twist means that Black Adam's actions throughout the movie are kind of weird or inscrutable. I will say that you know to my earlier point, I think that one of the biggest issues of this movie is it does make mass murder look cool, and he
That's an
he
issue?
he, he, he is like a total he is like a total badass, right, in those earlier scenes, and
Hmm.
it's like, wow, this is actually like this guy is being a badass, and he's electrifying like 50 dudes and blowing things up, and it's really really cool. But also he's like killing all those guys, and yeah, they're like bad imperialist mercenaries. I'm not saying they're good guys, but it's just like it didn't quite sit right with me, and I think it's not supposed to sit right with you. I think you're supposed to be like, hey, this guy is kind of bad, but then he like becomes okay by the end. Is
Yes,
kind of the journey that the character
I
goes on,
guess,
right?
yeah, what that's making me think of now is that I guess maybe they should, if they were going to do this progression of he's evil and then we find out his real motivations and now he's doing the right thing, did we need to glorify his mass murdering up until that point? Because there were these scenes where you're getting like the Western standoff and these weird needle drops coming
Right.
in with the slow mo, which I like stuff like that. I mean, who doesn't like, a well executed badass slow mo scene with a good needle drop? But it was a little weird because it's like, I don't think we're supposed to be rooting for this character
Right.
right now, but it's
Yeah,
trying to make
exactly.
him like this cool badass. And it just felt a little forced and I don't think it flowed very well. But if you're going to have this scene after he kind of comes around and his emotional arc is complete, and now you're like, hell yeah, like he's fighting for the right side now, maybe that would have been a little more rewarding. Um,
Yeah, I
so
guess it would probably have been too dark if they like
yeah,
the movie would have been too dark if they had like really leaned into how terrible some of his actions really are in the earlier
right.
parts of the movie, right? So, but yeah, I mean, the needle drops were like kind of awkward. That said, anytime
Yeah.
you put paint it black over someone killing people, it's gonna look kind of cool, and
Yeah.
and the movie doesn't really do anything to reckon with that. Also, using a Kanye West song in the context that they use it in, definitely did not age well over the course of the last
They
like three
decided
weeks.
that at the beginning of the 15 years of development.
they locked in the soundtrack 15 years ago, and never shall it change.
Nothing we can do.
Nothing you can. How could they have like? I can imagine like the music supervisor who got Kanye West's Power into this movie, like celebrating the day. It's like, yes, like, oh, we got the Kanye West to sign off on this, and then like the last few weeks, like what their mood must have been as all the
My
stuff has happened.
God. Too much social
Um,
context for a superhero movie.
hmm Okay, here was a cool moment in the movie that I really liked.
Okay.
Is there is a scene where like the bad guy has the kid. He's holding the kid, and he's like, "Give me the crown," and he like puts the crown on his head. He's like, "Give me the crown, or I'll murder the kid." Right, and then there's like an ultra slow motion scene where like he puts the crown on his head and like deactivates the force field at the same time.
Uh huh.
I was like, why did he deactivate the force field? That makes absolutely no sense, because then you allow Black Adam to kill. And I liked all this stuff with like super slow mo time. It's very reminiscent of Quicksilver from X-Men, but like I,
Right.
I like all that stuff. And then Black Adam kills this guy, and then you find out that was his plan all along, was to get
Right.
murdered, to go to the underworld. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Um, but it's such a weird structure for a movie. Like, there's very few movies that where literally it's like Black Adam is underground in the water chamber,
Mm-hmm.
and the bad guy is dead, and that's the end of the movie. I'm like, wow. I was like, I thought this movie was 2 hours
I
long.
thought it
Like,
was over.
yeah, I was like, this is it. This is it. But like, but here's why I knew it wasn't over, Sydney, is because Pierce Brosnan's character had like predicted all these terrible things that would happen, and we never
Mm-hmm.
saw them yet. So I was like,
Right.
something is still going to happen. But I'm like, at the current rate, there's still another like 20 minutes left of this movie, and so then he comes back. But anyway, so weird structure for a movie. Didn't hate it, but I did think it was kind of cool that like, oh, it's part of the guy's plan to die and go to the underworld. That's kind of cool.
Right.
Um, I do think like the Justice Society in this movie is largely ineffectual. Like, they go up against Black Adam multiple times in the movie. Then they go up against the Satan guy, the evil guy at the end, right? And it's like they're completely ineffectual. It's like Black Adam at one point is like, "Are we going to do this again?" And it's like, "Yeah, are we? Like, what is the point of it? Like, what is the point of it? You guys, these characters are so overpowered. There's like basically nothing you can do to stop them." And they at the end they help Black Adam take out the bad guy, but they're not Like, Black Adam is the one that rips the guy in half. Like, it,
Right.
it made the Justice Society look really weak and lame. And I think that like anyway, just a bunch of assorted rambly thoughts about kind of the end of this movie. But how did the end work for you, where the guy went to the underworld, came back, then they had to fight him? What'd you think of the ending?
Right. I was with you in that point came around and I was like, "Oh, it's over." Cuz I didn't watch any trailers really. Like I try not to watch trailers these days for obvious reasons, but yeah, I was like, "Oh, it's over." And I kind of, this is
Yeah.
fine, I guess. And then he shows up and I'm like, "Oh, there's a whole other act, isn't there?"
Yeah. Yep.
But I agree with you that that slow-mo scene of when he kills the villain, who I forget his name, this pre-demon character,
Yep.
um, that did feel very Snyder, very Quicksilver. I thought that scene was really well done. That was when I truly felt like I was really nervous. Like I didn't know what was going to happen. I thought that was well executed. But then, yep, the demon guy happens. And yeah, the Justice Society is there. And the whole time I was kind of like, I don't really know what this movie is trying to say about like American interference abroad. And also it was constantly distracting that to me that Black Adam just has an American accent, which I don't think, checks out at
Right.
all.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and everyone is pretty much speaking English the entire time when a lot of people shouldn't be, but what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Um,
I was trying to figure it out too. I'm like, okay, there's this kind of fictional location, right? But it's kind of like uh, Egypt esque is kind
yeah,
of my sense,
Egypt
right?
coded.
Yeah. Kondok is the name of the place,
Right.
and then it's like it has now been occupied by like mercenaries, right? So, who like could theoretically you could argue would be like American, coded potentially, but then like Black Adam is stopping them, so that's good, that he's doing that. But then it's weird that Black Adam is American, it's like played by an American.
He's just the
Um,
Rock, basically.
but also he's stopping them in a way that's bad. And then also there's the Justice Society, which is definitely American. And Pierce Brosnan is in it, but like these are all Americans in it, and
Hmm.
they're trying to stop Black Adam, who's trying to stop the people from taking over the country. But then at the end they team up and they agree that we should really be stopping the demon from the underworld who wants to rule the whole world with evil. Okay, so
My
it's like,
head is
okay,
spinning.
by the end I'm like, okay, I can get on board with that mission. But yes, I would say that to the degree that the movie is trying to make any commentary on geopolitics, it doesn't really succeed.
I
I didn't
never
really get a
understand why
strong sense.
they take on so much in these movies and they always fumble it. But it is what you just explained. It is so complicated. Like there are so many moving parts and props to them, I guess, for making it relatively coherent. But I also think they did not have to do like half of that in order to have a successful movie. And to your point earlier about it having like this shock factor, I do think these movies are so afraid of retreading common tropes and common structure that they are just overcomplicating themselves. And I don't know, like the classic superhero story works for a reason. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a sucker for an origin story. I think there was a much simpler version of this that maybe would have been more successful.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps, perhaps. Uh, I want to talk to you about the post credits, but before I get to
Right.
that, I just want to reiterate my point about how whenever you watch a superhero, like this is the challenge that you have with the DC universe is most of the characters in the DC universe are basically gods, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Black Adam is basically god level powers. And so you have all these humans who have like some powers, like Cyclone can control the weather, and Atom Smasher can get really big, but they're facing off against a god. Like
A
it's
literal
not a fair
god.
fight. It just feels like why? What is the point of this? Like, why am I watching it? Because there's no way they're going to be able to defeat this guy. Not, I mean, I'm not saying you cannot overcome that. You know, you could have a thing like kryptonite, or hey, here, let's figure out what Black Adam's weakness is, and exploit that. But like, none of that happens in the movie. Like, you're watching these ineffectual people throw wave after wave of effort at this guy, and it's like, and then they do the same thing at the end with the demon character, and it's like, well, what is the point of this? It's like
It's true.
not only are they ineffectual, they're also not very smart. Because if they did, um, they would know to not keep fighting this guy using the same
They would
techniques.
understand their own limitations. That is interesting because they go in and they're just like, yeah, let's fight him. We can totally take him. And I think it is interesting that eventually they get him to kind of step down on his own terms. Like that is interesting. I also think that that should
Yes,
have
yes.
happened at like the halfway point, maybe, um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
just for better pacing and better structure. But yeah, why did they not? I guess why would they not have approached it that way, or at least
Well,
talked
because then we
about
wouldn't
that
get a ton of cool
option?
action scenes, Sydney.
There you go.
We wouldn't have
There it
gotten
is.
we wouldn't have gotten the city of Kondak getting
We
completely
wouldn't get painted black.
annihilated. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
yay, Tef Adam like completely destroying the city. Um, I think that by the way, the final character's name is Sabak. Just to be clear, we've
Okay.
referred to the character
Sabak.
a few times,
Thank
but
you.
it's Sabak. Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So didn't love the JSA. I will say like the one cool thing about that was the idea that like Fate at the end, the Pierce Brosnan character, he's like coming at Sabak like from all these different. He can like manufacture different versions of himself, and like that's kind of an interesting idea of like, oh, the only way to beat this person is if there's like 100 of me or whatever. You know that
Hmm.
I like that. That's kind of a cool idea. And then of course Fate dies at the end. I think you said you were a little bit moved by this. I was like, I would be moved by this. This would be like if in Endgame there was like the I am Iron Man snap moment, but you had never seen Iron Man before in a movie before. Like, okay, that would still be kind of cool, but it's way more powerful because we've seen Iron Man in like 10 movies prior to now. Do you know what I'm
It's a
saying?
great point.
But yeah, you seem to like the connection between Fate and Hawkman, right?
Yeah, I did like that. I think am going out of my way to say I liked it because I did so adamantly didn't like everything else. But and probably mostly because it's Pierce Brosnan, like it's like an actor I like, and so watching an actor you like have that happen, I guess, makes it a little more emotionally resonant. But I liked their dynamic. I liked both of their performances. But yeah, I totally agree with you. It didn't make me cry. I just thought it was kind of a sweet moment. I thought the delivery was good,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
would have loved to see, like, I would watch a Justice Society movie. There was also a great moment that I liked between Atom Smasher and Cyclone, where they were kind of talking about their origin stories and the way they view the world. It was like this glorious like 30 seconds where I'm like, oh, I wish the movie would slow down a little bit more,
Right, right.
and kind of have these slower character moments. I think it was almost afraid to do that,
Totally.
which to me was a bummer.
I will say I think that the Hawkman character and Doctor Fate had like really good chemistry. Like I think the team
Right.
all had like pretty good chemistry overall.
Yeah.
Like they gelled together well. I'm like the whole time I'm like, okay, this is a pretty cool team. Like you said earlier, Cyclone, like the way visually they represented Cyclone. That was pretty cool. Like I'd never
It was
seen anything
cool.
like that before, right? So, but the whole time I'm like, really, this is the way we're going to be introduced to Justice Society? Like all the characters in this one movie, you know? Um, in a movie called Black Adam, like at least have a movie called Justice Society. You know, like if they're who is the protagonist here exactly? Anyway, let's talk about the mid credits sequence, which
Right.
has obviously been the focus of a lot of discussion online. Dwayne the Rock Johnson's been tweeting out, "Hey, make sure you stay for the mid credits. Is awesome." Let me start by asking: when you saw this movie, was it at a press screening or a public screening? Which one?
It was a public screening.
Okay, did people stay through the mid credits, and if so, was there any reaction at all?
Yes, they did. Did I go opening night? I think I did go opening night. Yep, I did. But it wasn't like the theater wasn't super packed and
Mm-hmm.
there was a reaction. I wouldn't say it was like a big reaction. Did
There
you?
was
What
like a
kind of
couple
screening were you
people,
at?
a couple people. I went to a public screening, and a couple
Okay.
people shouted "woo," and like one or two people shouted "woo." That was it. So at the end of this movie, Black Adam decides, I don't want to rule Kontok. You know, I'm no one man should have all that power, to quote a problematic artist. And so he destroys the throne. He's like, this should be a democracy or whatever it is. I don't, he doesn't say anything like that, but and then that's the end of the movie. It's like, we should update the name Teth Adam to something else. Cut to Black Adam, credits, credits, credits. Cut to the title Black Adam, credits, credits. Uh, it's the same location. We see Black Adam there. A hologram projecting drone comes down from the sky, and Amanda Waller shows up, played by Viola Davis. I will say, I think every time I see Viola Davis in one of these movies, I'm like, I hope she got paid a lot of money for this.
Right, I know.
She's one of our greatest actors of this generation, and I'm
She
like,
is.
if this allowed her to buy, a Porsche or like in addition to her house, then I'm grateful
I'm
for that.
happy for her.
Yeah. And she's basically like, "Hey, you cannot leave the border of Kontok, or else, or Kondak. Kondak is the name of the place, right? You cannot leave these borders, or else something terrible is going to happen to you." And he's like, "What? What are you going to do? Like, I'm the most powerful being on this earth." And she's like, "I know beings that are not of this earth." And then I'm like, "Oh, like she's talking about Superman." And then Superman actually shows up, and he's played by Henry Cavill, and he basically says like, "We should talk," and that's the end of the credits.
Right.
What is your reaction?
Well, I think it's kind of an interesting dynamic with this one because everyone, or at least I, knew that that was going to happen. That was kind of the biggest selling point of the movie. I feel like was almost part of their marketing strategy that The Rock was just going to totally spoil it so that people would go see it for that reason. So there was no element of surprise for most people, and that's probably why there wasn't like such a huge reaction. But, and I don't know how you feel about Marvel, DC, the Snyderverse, if you care about any of it at all, but I love Henry Cavill. I love him as Superman. And so for me, I love Man of Steel, and I would love to see a Man of Steel too. Like all these different things people are talking about. It is exciting for me. But at the same time, I have such bad superhero fatigue that I'm like, sure, whatever we get, I'll go watch it and I'll try and enjoy it. But I think
Wow.
it is well, I do think it's a really cool thing to set up because they are like he's the only one who's a true match for Black Adam, which we were just saying it was tough for them to kind of do anything with that in this movie because the Justice Society is just so underpowered compared to him. But I think that'll be a cool matchup in the future and it makes me hopeful for what they will do with it. What do you think?
Well, I just want to say, I think the amount of work they're putting into these post credit, like most Marvel post credit scenes, are bad in my opinion. There's like
Yeah, I agree.
there's the kind of mid credits where they actually give you something that's like potentially related to the plot, and then there's like the very very end where it's kind of like a nice little bonus trifle that doesn't really affect anything.
Like
And
Pizza
the mid
Papa.
credit scene where it's like, there's a great tweet about Marvel, and like by Matthew Castle, who once wrote, "My favorite bit of Marvel films is where you sit through 9 minutes of credits to watch a 5 second clip of some guy stepping through a doorway and saying, 'It's me, Blorko.'" Like what most that's what most Marvel credits have become. And I tweeted this about this post credits, like, hey, if you are wanting to experience the thrill of the Black Adam post credits, but you don't want to go to the theater, just watch the Morbius post credit sequence on Netflix. It's literally the same vibe. Where did you see Morbius, Sydney?
Yeah, but I totally forget. They all blend together. What was the Morbius post-credit
So
scene?
at the end of Morbius like drives out to the middle of the desert and then like gets out of his car, and then like Vulture shows up,
That's
voiced by
right.
Michael Keaton, and he's like, "Hey, I hear you're in town. We should talk." Like it's literally the same, almost the same dialogue.
Oh my gosh, I didn't remember that.
And so it's basically like, on the one hand, it's super cool to see Henry Cavill wearing. It's like, I think a lot of us thought we would never see him in the suit again because
Right,
all of the history that like the Zack Snyder DC universe has seen, all the drama. It's like we're probably just never going to see Henry Cavill as Superman ever
right.
again. Like that's, and they have kind of like hinted at it. There's been a couple like teases at it. So for instance, there was a moment in Black Adam where I think Black Adam punched through a wall or it was like
Oh, he
some
like
fire got
or
on.
no. He Are you talking about the Superman poster?
There's a Superman poster. And I think some fire got on his face and it like burned his face out. And
Yeah,
so
he
I was
does
like,
his
oh,
little lightning fingers.
right. And it's like, oh, it's cool. It's funny that they're acknowledging that like we don't have like a Superman in this universe
Right.
anymore. Like that kind of stuff. Um, and then also in Shazam, the ending of Shazam. I don't know if you remember, but like basically Superman shows up, but you don't see his face at the end of Shazam.
That's right.
Um, And so it's like, oh yeah, we're probably never going to see Henry Cavill as Superman anymore. And it's like, I agree, Henry Cavill is an amazing actor, and has a lot of gravitas. And so to see him show up as Superman, super cool. It's awesome. It's fun. It's a thrill. At the same time, I wish they had put in more than just the bare minimum amount of effort into it, which is basically he shows up. He's like, "We should talk." It's like, why? Why is Superman even there? Like, why did they even need the Amanda Waller message at all? In that case, like Superman could have just showed up and told him. Like, it doesn't.
Well, I
It
also didn't like that choice of dialogue, "We should talk." I'm like,
it's so stupid. It's like,
you don't know each other. Like, why is that? There are so many interesting things going on here that you could put in that dialogue. We
yeah,
should talk.
we should talk. It's like, let's just use the Morbius
Yeah.
language. We should
They should
we
just do
should
that for
talk.
every post-credit scene now. Glup
We should
Shido
talk is
shows up and
we should talk
says
is the
we should talk.
universal catchphrase for there's other interesting things that are going to happen. So let's just why mess with success? Let's just keep using that. So anyway, so a lot of mixed feelings about the post credit scene, and it does seem as though it's possible we're going to see Henry Cavill again on the big screen. Like
I
that's,
hope so.
I don't think it's certain yet, but I think it's possible, and that's kind of cool. That's kind of cool.
Wait,
So
did you know going in that that was the post-credit scene, or did you go in blind?
I did not. I kept it out of
Oh,
all of my feeds, so
did
it
you
was a
cheer?
nice.
Were you one of the
I was
people
like,
saying
oh,
"woo"?
I was kind of like, I let out a little titter. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's kind of cool.
Huh. Oh, that's
Uh,
nice.
because I just literally thought we're never going to see that guy as a character again.
Right.
So anyway, uh, I. I mean, I hope we see Henry Cavill as Superman again. That'd be cool if he wants to do it, obviously, which I think he does. But I think the DC universe, as this movie shows, is in a pretty rough state right now. There's great upheaval at Warner Brothers
Oh
right
my gosh,
now.
it's like a
Uh,
mess.
yeah, and so I'm worried about the future of the DC universe, and I feel like I don't know that they needed this movie to be kind of. I mean, this is one of their few big bets of the year theatrically, so they needed to be like
Right.
relatively successful. But I think if they were hoping that this would be kind of a reset for the DC universe and like we're going to bring everyone back into the tent again and like attract people from a wide variety of places. This is one of the Rock's best openings in terms of box office, but I don't think it's really going to do the job that they want. I don't think it's
Mm,
going to be like a massively successful movie that's going to get people intrigued in the DC universe again. Certainly it's not performing nearly as well as like the Batman from earlier this year.
right.
So at the end of the day, it sounds like a lot of problems with this movie. You were just like, yeah, I was only praising Pierce Brosnan because I didn't want to be 100% negative on the film. But any closing thoughts on Black Adam, Sydney Volpe?
um, you know, we've talked about it all. I think this was an unimpressive movie to me, but I am glad people are liking it. Though, like you just said, is this going to be enough to get people invested in the universe? One of the biggest complaints I've heard is people saying Black Adam is arguably the least interesting character in his own movie. Like, I don't know if there was a ton of intrigue for like the future of the universe, but you know, it's a superhero movie. I thought it was a generic superhero movie. There were a bunch of little technical issues that bothered me that I didn't really talk about. Like I thought the editing was like atrocious. There's like a bunch of clunky dialogue. But what more can you expect? I didn't like it very much, and I wish I had liked it more, but it is what it is.
All right, and I think we can wrap it up there. Well, Sydney Volpe is a film critic whose work you can find at youtube.com/Sydney Volpe. Sydney, thanks so much for chatting with me today.
Thanks for having me on, David.